So we are at Siman Tzadik Zayin in Hilchos Basar B'Cholov, the last Siman of Basar B'Cholov. We've seen it several times in Halachas of Basar B'Cholov that there are certain harchokos, certain gzeras, certain degrees that are derabanan. Midoraisa something may be permitted, but the Chachamim made a gzera or harchoka meaning to keep a distance, to forbid certain things in order that we should not come to commit the real Isser. And one of those, of course, is eating chicken with a glass of milk. We've covered that in the very beginning, even though chicken is not awesome in the Torah with milk. Just meat is. Nonetheless, it resembles it. People can make the mistake. And in order that we should never come to make that mistake, the Chachamim have it within their jurisdiction to forbid certain things as they see fit.
Is it correct actually to say that Basar, if it was Daraisa, if it was cooked with milk, or separately, even that would be...
Remember, it's Asur be'achila. It's also if it was cooked together, right? Because the main Isser comes about through the combination of the two, through cooking.
But if you had a piece and a piece,
no,
Daraisa is not there.
It's not there. That's correct. Indefinitely one after another. Right. Right. I'm saying indefinitely one after another. It's only
even have one after the other.
Right. It's only a derabbanan. Yeah. So here in this simmer we have a halacha that is quite interesting. Not everyone is aware of it. And before we look into the mechaber, I'll tell you where this is very relevant. Well, one example where people are unaware. There are others they may think they know, but one is where they don't know. In the supermarket, you can buy a mixture for your bread machine. In other words, a flour, right, that you can pour into your bread making machine. And within 4 hours, you'll have bread. Now, there is bread for flour, flour for bread, whatever it's called, that is good and especially prepared for bread making, which is not a problem. The problem is with those bags that are prepared with additional ingredients to. They're kosher. We're not talking about non-kosher ingredients. The problem is that they have dairy ingredients. So you may say, so what? I've eaten chocolate chip cookies before with dairy in them. Right? And even those things that have, as you know, OUD or OUD, dairy equipment, it doesn't mean I can't buy it. It just means be aware that this may have halachic ramifications in the kitchen with what to eat it, when to eat it, because it's dairy or dairy equipment if you don't hold nat bar nat, because that's what dairy equipment is a little bit important. And it was made in dairy equipment, even though it has no dairy ingredients. So for some, this may be an issue. Okay, that's good to know, but what could be the problem if I buy flour with dairy ingredients?
With dairy.
Oh, so you know that. Okay. Right. Oh, you went through the whole thing? You covered the whole thing. Most people, a lot of people, I'm not going to say most, a lot of people don't know this. You cannot make bread with dairy ingredients or fleishik ingredients unless you did something to it. We'll talk about that today. What you need to do in order to be able to have dairy bread. Or fleishik bread, by the way. Either one. Okay? I use dairy because that's the one that's more common in today's supermarkets, because the flour, some of the flours you buy have dairy ingredients. Okay, so what is the problem? Where is the source? What's the source? So we always turn to the Gemara. The halacha here really is basically the conclusion of the sugyas, the various sugyas in the Gemara. In this case, it's psachim, even though it's mentioned elsewhere too, but it's mostly in psachim, where the Gemara there discusses this geder, this fence, this harchaka, of not making a dough with dairy ingredients or with fleishik ingredients. Why not? People may come to commit an isser. Even though, as Ilan pointed out, in the end, we can be even talking just about an isser d'Rabbanan. Makes no difference here. Even though they may not come to commit an isser d'Oraisa, so what? They may come to commit an isser. So they are allowed to make a geder for that. And what's the problem over here? The problem is that there are certain foods, like bread, I think more than any other food, that very, very often, very commonly, one can eat it in a fleishik meal and in a melicha meal. The same loaf of bread. One may have a slice for breakfast, one may have a slice for lunch or dinner. And if that bread contains dairy ingredients, here you are eating dairy with fleishiks. Since bread is eaten in various meals, so bread is one of those foods that can be possibly eaten, whether it's fleishiks or melichiks. So the Chachamim said, don't make it with dairy or don't make it with fleishiks, so that you should not come to eat it with the wrong combination. Very simple. And it's understood from the Gemara that this is not only ingredients of fleishik or melichik, it's even the tam of Shuman. Even just the flavor of the fat can be a problem. In Siman Tzadik Zayin, we are introduced a little bit to another concept that we've seen before in Taaruvot about reicha. The steam, the vapor, the odor, is that a problem or not? Can you bake a challah for Shabbos in the same oven that you're making the chicken for Shabbos at the same time? It's not melichik and fleishiks, it's a parv challah 100%. That will be the discussion towards the end of this Siman. We'll cover that maybe Thursday. But that is part of the problem over here. Even though there's no ingredients, there's something in the air. Is that going to be a problem? Not necessarily, by the way. That's not necessarily going to be a problem. Where it is for sure a problem is where it's one of the ingredients, where you really have milk in there, in the batzek, in the isa, in the dough. That you cannot have only because you may come to eat it with the wrong combination of food. All right. So that's the title of the Siman. Tzadik Zayin shelo lalush isa bechalav, not to knead a dough with milk, with dairy ingredients. But it also means with fleishik ingredients. You may ask, when do we put fleishik in dough? Well, there's quite a few foods, quite a few dishes that contain meat and there's dough, right? It doesn't have to be the dough itself, remember. It could be also a dough that has a filling of flesh, right? As we will see in the Ramah. Yeah. Meatloaf and the like. But we make meatloaf, so we will see what the difference is between what is permitted and what is not permitted. We're just talking in general terms right now that the Chachamim were concerned. And they said, as the Mechaber says, Ein lashin isa bechalav. Simply stated, you do not need a dough with milky ingredients. Shema yavo le'ochlaim basar. You may come to eat it with meat. All right. He did it anyway. He didn't know the halacha. He made a mistake. What now? V'him lash, if he needed the dough with the dairy ingredients, hapat asur. The bread is actually asur. Afilu le'ochlo levado, even for you to eat it by itself, without anything else. Okay, it's with milk. I'm going to eat it now by myself. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to eat it for breakfast. I'm going to make sure I don't eat it with flesh. I made a mistake. No, you can't even have it by itself. Mistake was made. Dairy was put into the bread. We didn't cover the whole halacha yet. There's exceptions, of course. Finished baking bread. Oh no, we put milk into it. We put butter in this bread. No, you can't use your bread. You can't give it away to a goy. It's not also behano. You can give it away to a goy if you know the goy is not going to sell it to a Jew.
How much feed it to your dog?
No problem. The dogs eat bread. Yeah. Bread.
Everything.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting halacha. The Mechaber says, look, if you did it, apat asur afilu le'ochlol levado, even by itself. Wow. Unless the following happened. And the following is also lechatchila. V'him haya davar mu'at, if it's a small amount of bread, a small amount of dough. Now, according to the Mechaber, what does small amount mean? So Mechaber says, in his opinion, the way he interprets the Gemara, the way he understood it from the Poskim, is that davar mu'at means kedei achila bebat achat. You can eat this bread at once. There's not going to be any leftovers. It's not so big that you probably can finish it all by yourself in one sitting.
Is that subject individual?
No.
There is some objective.
Yeah. People generally, this is such a small piece. Okay? It's in Yiddish they have what's called a bilkale. Have you heard of that?
Sure.
Yeah?
Brötchen.
A what?
Brötchen.
Yeah. Yeah,
A small bread.
a small bread. In Yiddish, in Polish Yiddish especially, it's called bilkale. You go to the bakery, they may not understand what that is if you say, I want a bilkale, right? Depending on who's behind the counter. But you've seen the round challahs. Little round.
Yeah.
That you can make kiddush on. You don't have to have kiddush. Yeah, but the kiddush challahs is the longer one. That's called the kiddush challah. There's a small kiddush challah like we have here. Downstairs for Shalosh Shudas. Then there's the longer kiddush challah, which is about this big. In other words, you don't have to buy a whole big challah. You can buy a kiddush challah, or you can buy. They have another name for it, a small kiddush challah, which is those real small ones. Yeah. Then there's something called the bilkale. A bilkale is usually round. Instead of being elongated, it's usually round. And they also come in different sizes. Small. Some of them are very, very small. It's so small that you can easily finish it. What? It depends how hungry you are. Yeah. So anyway, so if it's small that you eat it bebat achat in Mechaber's languages, or a second possibility is sheshinat surat apat, shetihen nikeret. This particular bread, you're gonna change its shape. You're gonna make a triangle homontash shape, and everybody knows this shape is a milchike bread. Everybody knows that this shape is unique, that they can never make that mistake. People who know about it, of course. You never eat meat with it, mutar. Then it's okay. This is lechatchila. That is how we can make certain things with dough that have either melichiks or fleishiks, as long as they meet either one of these conditions. Either it's a small amount that it could be eaten right away, it will therefore not be shared or in another meal, or the shape is so different and unique to that, everybody knows that this is a milchik or a fleishik or whatever. This Siman.
When you say everybody, you mean familiarization?
Yes, it's a customary thing in that community. Everybody just knows about it.
Like in Yerushalayim, they know that, like you say.
Yeah, they have certain shapes. Yerushalayim, the bakeries, everybody knows, burekas. Burekas, they either are cheese, mushroom, or spinach, right? There's no fleishik burekas that I know. So you have to be careful, of course, not to eat that bureka with fleishiks, but you can make them. Why can you make them with cheese? It's dough. Because of several reasons. First of all, burekas are small. You can eat the whole bureka. You're not going to leave over from that bureka. Well, there are some large burekas too. Plus, you see the cheese. Seeing the cheese, by the way, is even a better siman than the shape of the bread. You can actually see the cheese. See what I mean? So that everybody would be maskim. In other words, that is even a better siman, identifying siman, which would enable you to make that dough, even though you may eat similar kinds of things with fleishik and meals too. You will notice that here the main concern is bread. Why? So far we haven't learned about other things like burekas. We'll talk about that later. Right now we'll talk about most about bread because bread is the one of greatest concern, because bread is the one that's most, whether it's with milk or with flesh. That's why. So that's why the Gemara, the Poskim, Rishonim, Rachonim are all concerned about bread more than anything else. Cookies and cakes? Who eats that together with your steak? You eat that lekinuach seudah, you're going to have that for dessert. So we're going to talk about that, why it's less therefore of a problem than the bread. Because bread, you can actually have it in the middle of the meal. Whereas that which is eaten at the end of the meal, we will see, is less of a problem. So that's what we're concerned here most about bread. All right?
How is it then possible they used to commercial bakery?
Yeah.
Here on the West Coast, that had a head. How is it possible then to give a heksher to such a?
If it says that it's dairy.
The label under dairy.
Right.
The bread itself has no distinct.
Right. It has to
What
say.
you're saying that's not possible.
That's a good question. It's definitely a good question. In other words,
This was a few years ago in LA. You get the heksher.
did they remove that hechsher?
I don't
Right.
okay.
Right. Yeah.
What later?
Yeah. Well, technically, the bread may be kosher, maybe. On the other hand, the bread is asur. Yeah, the bread is asur to eat, even by itself, as you pointed out, because an isur was done. He put dairy ingredients. So how come he put a hechsher on it? Well, it could be, depending on the size of it, depending on if there was, that would exempt it, of course, the isur. Or it was wrong what he did. I'm not sure. Yeah, it could be. Yeah. not to mislead people. Now, he did hold that the fact that it had a label saying that this is dairy, then it's okay. But I don't think that would qualify, because the bread has to have a siman,
right?
Not the wrapping.
The label,
right? I agree with you. It would be a problem.
And how many people?
That's correct. That's true.
I don't know what's in my bread.
You don't? Oh, okay. All right. To read it in the words of the Gemara, what the Mechaber just says, it's mashma de'im. If you're going to bake ke'en tura shori. Ke'en tura literally translated means like the eye of a bull.
Yes, a bullseye.
A bullseye.
Yeah, the question I asked was it ke'en shari like a bull, or was it the eye of a bull? In either case, we didn't win.
What was that?
Ke'en shor. Was it supposed to mean something in the likeness of a bull?
Oh, yeah.
Or ke'en shor like the eye of a bull?
There is one opinion actually that says, unless it has the shape of a bull.
Right. Ke'en shor.
Yeah, and therefore the Rambam in the Rif, therefore learn pshat in that it's not talking about a size, it's talking about a unique shape.
Right.
Milky?
No.
In other words, if this bread that you're baking with Melicha's ingredient, right, has a unique shape like a bull, something unique.
Okay, bull is flesh
Bull,
shaped.
like bull. It's the milky.
I would think
Yeah,
bull is
it's something unique. That's what the Rashi's Poshup shot is, the size of the eye of a bull,
so small.
which is pretty small, right? In other words, if it's as small as the eye, according to Rashi, according to the size, talking about size, then it's mutter, right? Why? Because if it's so small, you're not going to have leftovers for other days. Which means that if you do have leftovers, you may forget that it had dairy ingredients. You will finish it at once. The Tur, however, brings down that other opinion, which is from the Rif, and the Rambam holds like that. That Ein Tura is a shinui, it's a change in the tzura, in the shape, in the form of the bread. Then, because it has a unique shape, you will remember that this is a Melicha bread. Anyway, from the Poiskim, it's mashma, and that's what Mechaber brings down the Halacha Lemais. That either one of the two is fine. Either unique shape or a very small size that you can pretty quickly. The only question is, what does pretty quickly mean? From the Mechaber, it's mashma, bebat achat means you eat it at once. In other words, I guess a few bites. Even though bebat achat means usually at once, kedei achila bebas achas, and that would make sense if it's as small as an eye. Possibly it also could be that it took you 2 or 3 bites. But you basically...
Within a meal.
Within a meal, you always finish it.
Because that's what they say about whatever
Yeah.
milk.
Right. From their Torah's Chatas, from the Ramah, it's mashma that as long as you are able to finish it within that one day. So it appears to be that there is a difference of opinion as to what does it mean that you are able to finish it quickly. Does it have to be bebas achas quickly enough, in other words, in the meal or so, or even during the day? That could make a difference on the size that you are able to make. Either way, everybody's concerned that you should not have leftovers. So if you know for sure you're going to finish it today, for sure, then it's not a problem. Now, the question arises with chalas for Shabbos. The chalas for Shabbos, even though, of course, we eat chalas in a fleishik meal, anytime anybody makes that kind of a size of a challah, he cannot say, I'm going to eat it in one day, because the size of challahs that are made today, as opposed to what they used to do in the past, there's always leftovers.
Depends on the size of it yesterday.
Yeah, that's also true. But we don't go by that.
Yeah, So
we're not going to go by
So
that.
how many people do you use the size of the challah?
No, but I'm just saying, comparing a challah today to the past, because there were those who held that if you're able to finish it on that day, then perhaps it should be mutter, like chalas or Shabbos. So came along the Aruch HaShulchan, one of the later poskim, says, but not like the chalas or Shabbos that we bake for ourselves today, which we don't finish in one Shabbos in one. In other words, if you were to bake those sizes of chalas, don't tell me that you're going to finish it on that day, because many times there's leftovers from there, so that you wouldn't be able, that would not qualify, according to the Ramah, of being eaten in one day. Even though some large families may finish it in one day, that's not good enough.
Friday nights were by handing, I think, challahs.
Big ones? Is that right?
A lot of guests.
Must be a lot of guests.
A lot of guests.
Sure. So either you have the mechaber that says bebas achas, which is a small amount, or you have the Torah's chatas, which has within one day. But If it's one of those sizes that you're not going to finish within one day, then you can't do it. However, if it has the other heter of shinui in the shape, then that's fine, because you're usually not going to, it's like we have cutlery. Many times we have blue for milchiks, orange for fleishik. We have an identifying siman. We spoke a little bit about it in the past, about an identifying siman, which can help sometimes. The cutlery should be different, and if not in the color, then in the shape, and in the design, so people should not make the mistake. It's happened quite a bit. It happens all the time. By mistake, we put this knife in this drawer or in this sink. We forget. And I've asked my wife has asked me, what's this doing over here? Because we're not paying attention. We don't realize what we took and what we put down and so forth. Same thing we will see in the Ramah will apply to pladin and pastida. That these are items or food items that one can easily see that they are made from melichiks or fleishiks. They have that as a year. So like we said before, you can see the cheese and see the meat as you do in meatloafs, then that would not be the problem. So let's see it inside. So we said either it's a small amount, or if you change the tzuras apas, then it's mutter. Kayoytze boy, another halacha, enofin pat betanur shetachu be'aliyah. You do not bake bread in an oven which was smeared on the bottom surface with aliyah. Now what's aliyah? Aliyah is very tasty. It's the fat from the tail of the sheep, called liya in Arabic, or dombe in Persian. It's a delicacy. In the Middle East, in Israel, if you go to restaurants in Tiberia, they'll tell you that we'll give you, with your lafa and with your meat, we'll put it together with this fat, and here you say, well, cholesterol, grease and all that, but it's a very, very tasty fat. So they used to use it, apparently, to smear, to lay it down as a layer on the oven floor. And that would somehow give off some flavor to the food that was being baked on top of it. So instead of mixing it inside, they actually laid it out on the oven floor, on the bottom part of the oven. So such an oven that has aliyah at the bottom, enofim pat betanur. You cannot bake a bread in that oven. V'mafa'o, if you did bake it, dinoki sashin elosha bechlav, it would have the same din as dough that was baked with milk, because it will enter it. In other words, there will be some vapor, some flavoring that will enter the bread that will be quite recognizable, and that would make that bread a fleishike bread. In this case, a fleishike bread. Ramah says, "V'lachen nohagin lalush pat im chalav b'chag haShavuot." We have a custom to knead bread that was made with milk, cheese or whatever, for Shavuos, for the holiday, when we have cheesecake. Gam b'shuman, and with fat, lichvot Shabbat. Why? Why can you do these things with the fat or with cheese in the little bread that you make for those occasions? It's all considered small. They used to bake some small breads that contain those ingredients. Gam kitzuratan meshune mishar pat, and their shape is always different, as our custom is, than any other regular bread. So everybody knows, this is the melicha bread, or this is the fleishike bread, or whatever. This has melichis and this has fleishik, even though it's not a bread per se, but it's a dough that's baked. The same halacha. We are concerned that it is eaten in the fleishike meal or in the melicha meal, and it has the other ingredient. Nonetheless, because it's small enough or it has a unique shape, we're hopefully not going to make the mistake of mixing it or eating it at the wrong meal. The chol shekain, paladin or pastida, the mutarin. As we said before, there are certain dishes like paladin and pastida, which are filled with, they are like meatloaves or like a kugel that has meat in it. Or like in Arabic they would call it ejeh, which is also a dough that has vegetables and meat. They are mutarim. Why? Because you can see the actual flesh. You can actually see them sticking out. So you're not going to make that mistake. But, however, if you're baking paladin or pastida in that oven, don't break any bread next to it. And I added the word next to it because that's what's understood, that's where the real Isser is, as opposed to above it, far away, which is another sieve. Why? The chayshinan shema yazuv min hashuman alapat. You know, sometimes when we learn these halachas about ovens and stoves, you have to keep in mind that their ovens and stoves do not look like ours. So you have to picture what stove and oven we're talking about. We're not talking about the oven that has various racks. You know, because they would just say, what's wrong? You know, put this one on this rack, put this one on that rack. So we're not talking about those kinds of ovens. We're talking about you could have, if you went to a matzah bakery, you know what I mean. You've seen those holes in the wall, perhaps, or even if it's not a hole in the wall, it's made out of clay or whatever, and it has, of course, a vent through where the heat goes out, the smoke goes out. But basically, you have one surface. Pizzas, brick oven. You put it down. There's enough room to lay out things. Okay, that's what we're talking about here. And then it makes it a little bit clearer what the problem is. So you don't bake a bread together with the paladin or pasta, which are fleishiks. The chayshin and shema yazub min hashuman alapat, because we're concerned that gravy coming from the meat is going to travel on the surface and get to the bread. So even though that bread was a parva bread, I never put any other ingredients that was a problem. But the gravy is going to get to it. And if the gravy gets to it, it's going to be a fleishike bread. And then the bread will be asur. The chayshinan. And by the way, im zav tachtav, if it did flow underneath it, dino kilu niloshimo. It has the same din as though it was kneaded with it. And therefore, he says, no hagim lasum hatfila befi hatanur. He brings down, I think, from the Beis Yosef, the custom is to put the tefillah. The Aruch HaShulchan says that tefillah is the pastida. At the entrance, at the beginning of the oven, so anything else is further away from it. Even if it's in a pan, so we say, if it's in a pan, it's not going to drip. No, we're also machmir even if it's in a pan, lechatchila. At the evet, it could make a difference if it was sitting in a pan, we saw that nothing dripped. So by the evet, okay, you shouldn't have baked the challah at the same time that you baked the pastida, but there was probably no gravy that flowed from the pastida towards the challah because it was sitting in a pan. But if it was not sitting in a pan, and especially if you saw it going, it's a problem. They were always concerned, even if you don't see a gravy, because if it's nivla in the walls of the oven, if it's absorbed, some say it's like a mepapea. It could travel all over the tam and get to the challah. All right, that's the Seif Aleph. So where we get an introduction about the various possibilities that can happen with the dough. The question, however, is, one of the questions the poskim discuss over here in Seif Aleph is like this. Okay, so we see that there's a gzera. We see that there's a need for a harchaka. People make mistakes. People forget. Fine. But what happens in a situation of shogeg? Now, I already told you more or less that if somebody did not know the halacha, somebody did it by accident anyway, it's still also, but it's not so simple. The discussion is, if somebody did not know and by mistake poured a little bit of milk, do we really say that the gzera applies to him too? Because he didn't mean it. He didn't want to do it that way. It just happened anyway. Because remember, what we're saying is that you can't eat it at all. If the halacha would say, well, since you have milk with it, well, guess what? You can only have it for breakfast and milk. Well, then we would have no problem. But the halacha is very strict here. If a mistake was made and milk or milking ingredients went into this bread that does not have a unique shape and it's not a small amount, that bread is also for me to eat. I can't use it. I have to get it out of my house. So that's why we have a real serious discussion about, well, what happens if the guy didn't know the halacha? Does it also apply to him? He just found out. Or do we say it only applies to a guy who knew the halacha, he did it anyway, and, it's a knas, we penalize him. Aruch HaShulchan says very good. He says, the whole idea was a geder, the whole idea was a fence, What difference does it make if it's a shoygig or mazid, intentionally or unintentionally? He knows the halacha or not. If the whole idea is to prevent him from ever coming to eat that bread with fleishiks, we say it's also. So it doesn't make a difference that it was a mistake. But Pri Megadim, if you look at the Pri Megadim, he really has a suffix. What happens if it was b'shoigeg here? He didn't know that it was also, it was b'shoigeg. Even though he says the majority of the person appear to say that it's also. But he has a tzorech chiyuv. It's a good question. I mean, I didn't know. Right? But I think the Aruch HaShulchan has a very good, strong point. I mean, why should it make a difference? All right, yes.
Another question is bilkos, small amounts.
Yeah.
About making a whole bunch of them, and you store some in a separate place in a plastic bag. And they're very or flashing, whatever.
No, but remember, the only heter so far that we have is either a unique shape that can identify it as a Melicha or a small amount. Otherwise,
I think he's meaning small amount for. He wants to make a small amount to eat with two. He's going to store it now for the next two. Is that called a small amount? Or?
to put it away.
Yeah.
Also not.
You're not going to eat it all.
Also not. Very good question. Yeah, I think I saw somebody bring it down. That when we say small amount to eat it bebas achas, we don't mean to store it away for you to eat it bebas achas another day.
We don't.
Okay, you see what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't mean that. We mean that you eat it now, on that day. Yeah, so very good point. Very good question. Yeah.
So then how do bakeries make to help money?
They don't make it milchiks because of that.
You're not to make small breads, just don't lick.
Yeah, they make small bread, but not milchiks. That's exactly it. That's why we don't have milchik bread in the bakery. But you will have, and we'll discuss that next, various kinds of cakes. We'll talk about that in a minute. But that's a very good question. It would have to be eaten on that day. Yeah, not to put away, even though it's a small amount. The Taz, I saw the Taz here. Interesting Taz. Good, very good analysis of the following situation, which is something we just discussed recently in the previous Siman, when we talked about medocha, the pestle, the grinder. So we said then that it is possible for meducha to become fleishiks if you ground onions together with meat at the same time. All right. In other words, there is a way, imagine a way that a meducha can be fleishiks. Fine. Generally speaking, meducha is parv. Because what is a meducha used for? Spices. Let's assume that it's only used for spices.
Like grinding meat on the spices.
Would not make it a fleishik. Yeah, exactly. Now, so the Taz says, wait a minute. What happens if I use the meducha to grind garlic? Can I use that garlic in melichiks or fleishik? The answer is yes. That meducha is not a fleishik meducha. I can use those ground spices with anything I want. It's a part of the meducha. Comes along the Taz and says, but wait a minute, I have a good question. He says, what happens if I have a fleishik in meducha and I forgot about that and I went and ground garlic? Can I have that garlic with fleishiks? Did you get the question here?
Yeah.
With milk.
With flesh.
With fleishiks. With milchiks for sure I can't. It's a problem. A meducha that is fleishik, that I ground garlic or onions, that is sharp stuff, I can't put that in the milchik pizza, right? That I know for sure. The question is different.
No, because of the bread, because of the fleshing bread.
Exactly. I ground garlic right now in this meducha that is fleishiks. Can I take this garlic and use it with fleish?
Well, you should have asked, can I have it by itself?
No, well, nobody eats garlic by itself. But anyway.
I know someone who
For help. Yeah. But anyway, you say, what's wrong? It's a fleishik in meducha. But the Taz says, but wait a minute. Based on the halacha we just learned here in Siman Tzadik Zayin, that mistakes can happen, this is used for grinding spices. One of these days I may grind spices and eat it with milchiks.
That's a different question.
See? Like the bread.
So therefore I'm allowed.
Therefore I shouldn't even have it with the fleishiks.
So therefore I shouldn't have a fleshing
Meducha. I have a fleishik in meducha.
Now that I have a fleshing meducha, I'm allowed to eat whatever was grounded, even if I'm not going to have it.
If it's something that can be eaten with both. Mm-hmm. If it's always meat, no problem. I'm not going to have the meat If I grind meat, I can grind. But I ground garlic in this meducha that's fleshik. Can I have it with fleshiks? Or can I have it by itself?
Right.
Just like the bread. Because it's one of those foods that I can use either one. Good question.
Does it have garlic?
Yeah, I give an example of garlic.
No. What about...
Then it may not be a problem.
That is the key
Because
together with the
you need it both. You need the
Well,
char,
I'm
remember?
asking
Yeah.
you-
I guess it wouldn't
When
be.
he says that
Yeah, no.
meducha is fleshing, so
Yeah.
the question is-
Only where it would present a problem, where we would have the blias of the flesh. Yeah. Yeah, obviously, good point. So the Taz says no problem. You can have it with your flesh. Why is that different than bread? You understood the question, right?
Sure.
The difference is, this is the fleshik meducha. I'm not going to take the garlic and put it in melichix. This is a fleshik meducha. I'm going to take the garlic that I just made in the fleshik meducha and put it on pizza? No way. I can see I can't. I mean, I will be reminded right away that this is fleshix, that this is melichix. I don't see that with bread. What's going to remind me in bread when I see a loaf of bread? Oh, I can't eat this with the flesh, with my meal now, because it has milk. What's going to remind me, unless there's a tzura, unless there's a shape, unless it's small, of course, then I don't have the problem to begin with, or unless I can see the cheese. Right? So very good question, but the teretz is simple. You're reminded by the meducha, that it's a fleshik meducha. But anyway, the Pri Megadim points out that because the Taz's example involves goose fat.
I don't understand the Taz's answer quite so simple.
Yeah.
Because, granted, if I'm going to eat the garlic right away, not put it in storage later,
Yeah.
then I have the same situation as if I did bread to eat right away. But if I'm going to grind it in a ducha that's fleshik and put it aside for later, why is that any better than...
Not for later use. We're not talking about later use.
Well, if it's not for later use, bread I'm also allowed to do for...
No, I can't.
You said if it's small,
If it's small only.
Right.
Only if it's small.
So, well, garlic will also have to be something that I'm going to be able to use right now for whatever I'm preparing right now. Not in such large amounts that I still have some left over.
Yeah. Well,
So by the bread we said we can't have leftovers. We have to have
Right.
a small enough amount that it will consume right away and leftovers. But the garlic now we're also saying no. So it's still a parallel case to the bread. Right now the garlic
Yes.
is no better case than the bread because I'm going to have garlic leftovers. Then what does it help me that I'm using a flashing meducha now? I come into the kitchen, my wife, let's assume I had one, ground the garlic in the flashing meducha. I come into the kitchen, I don't know what meducha is used. I usually take the garlic and put it in my dairy dish, my dairy food. I don't know what meducha she used. So why would it be any less strict a case if there's a possibility of leaving some garlic behind and someone can come and use in the same household and not include it? So does it help that he knows that flashing meducha? The person is doing the grinding.
the person is doing the grinding. Let's assume you have...
You know what I think? Just
Yeah.
quickly,
Yeah, go ahead.
come to think of it,
Right.
probably they never ground garlic or whatever in advance because it loses. So it's understood that it's going to.
Oh, so you're saying that, okay.
Yeah. So that's one.
Most
so
likely.
It doesn't mention that, but you should.
But
if
you
that's
should have,
it,
you're saying you
should
should have
mention
mentioned that. Yeah,
Since
good.
it's for immediate use anyway, so it's like a parallel case to the bread that's eating. And
Okay. Yeah, because it is a parallel case somewhat. Not
Yeah.
exactly the same. But anyway...
Excuse me, allowed to leave garlic, like if it with,
Yes.
with an onion?
If you put it in oil, there are ways to leave that you can leave over. Yeah, sure. Yeah. There are ways. Right? Your question is another question in Yore Deah. Somebody cut onions, and can you put it away overnight? Yeah. If you leave the head of the garlic, it's fine. Or if you put the garlic in oil, so because even a container by itself is not sufficient. So that's a separate problem of putting away onion and garlic and the like. So therefore, here the Pri Megadim picks on the Taz's example. In this particular example, he happened to have used goose fat, not meat. So he says, the Pri Megadim says, Taz used goose fat? What do I learn from that? Even though the meat ingredient here is a derabanan meat.
right.
Because goose is not, right, it's not meat. It's off. So even if the whole Isser here is derabanan, and it's a derabanan under the derabanan, it's still Asr. In other words, don't think that this Gzera, this Halacha here only concerns beef.
It's a triple deraba.
It's a triple
Number one, it
deraba.
wasn't cooked yet.
Exactly. It's a triple
Then
deraba,
it's
yeah.
a goose.
Right. It's a harchaka, yeah. All the way. Even if it's a goose. Exactly. Nevertheless, the Ma'arit I saw brings down that if it's a bread that's only eaten for dessert, and we're going to talk about cookies later, if it's a bread that's always eaten for dessert, it's a kind of bread, it's a kind of a dough, let's not call it a bread, that's always eaten for dessert, it's never going to be eaten with the meat, it's not a problem.
I don't know hours after eating meat.
Oh.
So what does it help me that it's dessert? Dessert, I spend an hour.
No. So what is he saying? You didn't cop what he was saying.
Maybe it's a different kind of dough. Can you maybe use that?
The Marit's point over here is no, it's different. If this kind of a bread is traditionally always eat at the end of the meal, then even though it was made with Melichic ingredients,
yes, the
Gezerah does not apply for it. In other words, he for sure is not going to eat it in a fleishik meal for dessert. Obviously. We're not talking about, that's always usher. Even if you're a Yeke.
Yeah, that's why I don't understand why they had
even if you're from Bavaria. You're right, whatever. You would have to wait at least 3 hours. Right? I think so. No? Really? Anyway. You would have to wait 3 hours. So we're not talking about having that bread for dessert in a fleishik meal. No, of course not. But if that's the kind of bread that's always eaten later, not in the middle with the meat, the gzer of the chachomim, the chashash that the chachomim had for bread that's made with milk does not apply to it.
In other words, they weren't going to this kind of harhaka on things that I'm not eating as...
At the time I'm eating it with the meat. Exactly.
As bread.
Exactly. Following? In other words, the gzer of bread, which is that you eat within the meal, does not apply to something that's never eaten within the meal.
So the question is made from that blood?
Well, in this case, it's neither, because in this case, the Marit adds an additional detail, the timing of when it's eaten.
Right, so in other words, it could be a regular bread.
It could be a regular
dough.
Yeah, it could be a regular dough. But everybody knows this is eaten at the very, very end now, with your cup of tea or coffee or whatever you like for this.
Now, the isser is not to bake it. I mean, the isser is not to prepare the dough. There is to bake it.
I didn't see any difference in that.
The difference being because when you're preparing the dough, you might have not made up your mind yet whether a dessert type of bread or as a regular.
Okay.
That might be a decision that you make at the time that you bake it.
Okay, but you're raising a different point, which we're going to get to next. The next point that we're going to talk about is, okay, and maybe that will answer your question. Let's say somebody made the dough. He put milk, he baked it. He says, oh no, I put milk into that dough. I'm not supposed to. Can I make a change now to that bread and make it different shape? Can I do something to it right now?
To save it.
To save it.
I mean,
Exactly. Oh, so some say what you said. This will be a form of mevatel isur lechatchila, perhaps. Therefore, they do not allow to break it up. There's even one who says, go ahead and break it up to small little pieces and give it out, where each piece can be eaten right away. There is such a svara to do, but of course. Most do not. I think this is the grandfather of the crazy flacy, by the way, because that's what I think so. We don't go by that. But sometimes you may be able to make a shinui. Maybe. We'll see when. It may be possible. Poshup pshat, the poshup pshat is, shinui does not help after it's all baked. Once it's baked, like Ilan said, the isser is there already. What are you going to change now? It's an avela. No, it's not. It's a chanan, whatever you want to call it. You can't be mevatel it. That's it. It's awesome. So that's the question the Pesach Tshuva brings down over here.
So they're asking it after it was baked, not after the dough was mixed. And so not saying that at the point in time which the dough was mixed, it's already an isser, and therefore you can't bake it now.
Not after it's finished baking, but while it's baking, or while it's after you finish making the dough, you can still change it. Okay?
So the dough is
not the isser,
it's the baking. That's the issue.
Right. The Pesach Tshuva says that the shinui will not help you after it's all done, after it has become an isser, but before.
But before you baked it, even though you didn't mix the dough, you can still
change. You can still change your mind.
It doesn't become an issue till after you bake it.
Exactly. Yeah. Pri Megadim holds the same thing I saw. You can't divide it up later on. Oh, hey, take a small piece. Take a small piece. No, that will not help.
And put it in some more.
If you can still make the change before the Isser is Chal, yeah, sure, yeah. Because only once the Isser is done is it Asr. And as we said earlier too, another kind of hecker that would be possible before it's completely baked is to put cheese on top of it. In other words, to make some siman. Oh no, okay, let me add some cheese on the side. Let me put something, let me decorate it with some cheese. You caught it at the last minute, and you could put something there that will identify it as Melicha. You could do that.
Just be sure.
After you take it out of the oven?
No, in the oven, yeah.
No, if it's not completely done yet.
If it's not completely done.
I don't know how it's
right.
going to affect if you take it out of the oven when it's not completely done. It might not bread.
Yeah.
Well, there are some people who taste as they, if it's not done, then they could add something.
They can add something. Yeah. Now there's a interesting tshuva in the Sefer Das Torah, who says, by the way, this Isser applies during the 9 days too, when we only have melichiks. Don't think just because we only have melichiks during the 9 days that you can get away with it then and put melichiks into your dough. We don't have flesh then. Right? He says, but wait a minute. Maybe there will be a bris, a sudas mitzvah, or maybe there will be a choila. These two individuals, these two situations allow you to eat meat. Right? Choila, a sick person. Sudas mitzvah, pidyon ben, a bris milah, right? You don't have chasanas then. But anyway, no, he says you can't have it. Even though you usually don't have fleishiks during those 9 days, you may eventually come to eat it in one of those situations where it's mutter to have meat. Interesting. I thought that was an interesting tshuva. Yeah. Okay. Just before we finish over here, just a very important machlokes in the poskim that applies to this first seif. We pretty much understand that once it becomes asur, it's asur. There's no way to fix it. It applies to whether it's shoigig or mezid. However, what happens in the following scenario? He only put a drop of milk. You hear that?
Yeah, it's the bottle b'shishim.
It's bottle b'shishim anyway. Would that be okay? Pirmei Godim brings a very interesting situation. I don't know if it's his example or I think he takes it from somewhere else, I forget, where the case is about when somebody wants to add a little bit of milk to a wine. Somehow there used to be certain wines that if you added a drop of milk to it, or 2 drops, or a little bit, it would do something good to the wine. It would fix it. Maybe the wine was a little bit too strong, sour, I don't know, dry. And somehow the milk would do something to it. I don't know. But he brings out this kind of a scenario. Would it be okay to do that to wine? What's the question? The wine is kosher wine. It's not flesh. Yeah, but wine is with flesh. That's where this question arises. Wine is drunk with flesh, especially in France. Right? So it's a good question. Would you be able to add milk? Now, what's the suffix? The suffix is not, can you add a lot of milk? Because obviously you may have a similar problem than with the bread. So the question is just a little bit, where it's going to be batal b'shish. So the Pirmei Godim says, based on that, even though it's a good question whether the wine can be used all along because it's used with meat also, this question can apply to our bread too. The question of batal b'shishim, minute amounts.
With the bread, it would be by accident, no?
Oh, you're saying something. Very good. You're saying something. What you're saying, perhaps, what you intended to say is, there's a difference. No. There's a difference between what you want to accomplish in the bread and in the wine. Could make a difference for where. I mean, the issa should be the same because the mistake can happen either way. But perhaps there's a difference between in the mevatel iser lechatchila, because mevatel iser lechatchila is a problem, like Ina pointed out before. This is going to be a bittul iser by lechatchila being mevatel b'shish. However, in the wine, he's not being mevatel and iser. He's fixing something. That's his intention here. Is his intention to mevatel the iser? Like you see what I mean? So that's where if that's what you intended, it's a good point. That would be a big chiluk between doing that in wine versus doing that in bread, in a lechatchila situation, where you may be a mevatel iser lechatchila in bread. Just a little bit, yeah, but it's a mevatel iser. In other words, you can't do that just, you know it's aser. Right? Even though you have less than 60, you can't do it lechatchila. It's like mevatel is lechatchila. But in wine,
Did you label the bottle?
no, we never talked about labeling so much.
With the bread, we said remove.
Right,
Therefore,
right.
but with the
It would have to be a big siman. Like Ilan said, a lot of people don't look at the labels. If it would be, I agree with you. If it would be an identifiable siman, you have a cow, right? Maybe, yeah. It doesn't have to be in the shape, necessarily. It has to be a siman that people will not make the mistake. So if you can come up with such a siman on anything, that people know this is Melicha, they won't make the mistake, fine. How about
is there some sort of average intelligence?
No.
If I can find someone foolish enough to understand it.
Anyway, the Tzemach Tzedek, I believe, the Shuchan Tzedek answers the scenario with the wine. I think it was the case of the wine, or the case of Bitul B'Shishim, one of the two. No, it was the wine, because it says wine is ordinary. It can be used in a Melicha Kamir or in a Fleish Kamir. And so it's a Mevatel Yisrael Lechatchila. And Minchas Yaakov also holds like that. Chochma Sodom, yeah, that's what they hold. But the Chochma Sodom, which I'm surprised, but he was Mekel here. Chochma Sodom, Knesset Agdola, they were matter. In the case of wine, like you were trying to say, all his intention, kavana, is to be metaking the wine. So his intention is not to be mevatel. In the case of the wine, it would be permissible. But without shishim, it would be also, because of the same problem we have with bread, obviously. Yeah. The Aruch HaShulchan gets into this a little bit more, and he elaborates a little bit. I like it. He has a nice way of getting into something and taking it apart. He says, the Gzera of the Chachamim was only legabe bread. He says, not legabe other things that are batal b'shishim. So if you want to answer, even if there is shishim, you're going to answer that by bread, but not by shar dvorim. Because the Gzera did not apply to shar dvorim. The Gzera was lechem. Lechem is used. You're going to say so is wine? But the Gzera was only on bread, not on wine. If there is shishim, okay? By bread, even if there is shishim gozru. Kaf HaChaim, I think, says the same thing here. That the Gzera only applies to bread if you have other food items that maybe are used, interchanged by Melicha Zefreishim, but there's shishim. If there's no shishim, it's a problem, obviously. But if there is shishim, you don't have to worry about it.
Now, if there is no shishim,
right,
is it a problem, or is there actually an extended Gzera that applies? Are you saying, practically speaking, there's a problem here? Be careful what you're doing.
Yes.
Are you saying he's over the Gzera in this form?
No, practically speaking. Practically speaking only.
So therefore there is no problem by 60.
Right.
Because there was no Isser?
Yeah, but by bread, apparently, there would be an Isser even.
Right, because...
All right, just to finish up, cookies.
That's nice.
Cookies, cookies, cakes that have milk, that have butter. Many of them have milky ingredients. And this is, by the way, it is a problem sometimes. My wife pointed it out to me. You can buy chocolate chip cookies that have milchiks in them, that are made with dairy. There's dark chocolate with non-dairy. She says she doesn't buy the chocolate chips with dairy because we eat chocolate chips all the time.
Interesting.
Not me personally so much. Even though I like them, and I will, and I can have them perhaps after a fleishik meal too. But if they're going to have chocolate chips that are dairy, I may forget. Because how would I know that it's a milchik cookie? Now, a lot of cookies are milchiks.
Sure.
Okay? Yeah. And my wife needs to label them. These are milchik cookies. This is a milchik brownie. A brownie. Yeah. And there's parva brownies too. There's a big difference. The milchik is always the better one. Anyway, so you definitely have to label them. You definitely have to be careful with them, because cookies are commonly in both kinds of meals. But is there an Isser? No, there's no Isser. What's the potential problem? The potential problem here is like this. Not that you're going to eat it with the flesh. As the Poskim explain, all of these sweet stuff are not eaten ordinarily together with meat. If anything, they're eaten after the meal. So where do you have a problem? It's within the 6 hours. Follow me? The only problem you have with cookies is that you may come to eat it within the 6 hours of the flesh, not at the same time.
Right.
So it's mashma for the poskim that the gzera of the chachamim was only for that which is eaten together with the flesh, not after the flesh. See what I mean? That is why it is okay to make all these desserts with melachiks, as long as you label them, so that you don't come to make the mistake of even eating them within the 6 hours. I mean, that's the problem, right? The problem is you may make the mistake of after you ate your chicken dinner, you're going to have your cup of tea, not milk and coffee, obviously, you're going to have a tea with chocolate chip cookies that are melachiks. It can happen. Oh, I forgot to tell you, honey, this is melachiks. Oh, now you tell me. No. So, but that on that there's no gzera. The gzeras chachamim was only on with that which is eaten with together with the flesh, not with that which you may come to eat within the 6 hours. Even though it's usher, and you want to label it, but on that there's no gzera. So you can make cake, cookies with Melicha, just make sure you label them, so you don't come to eat them within 6 hours, but the gzera there is no. Why? Because these things are not traditionally eaten in the meal. They're sweet. So we have them for dessert. It's like the bread of the Maharitz Shuba with the bread. Something that's uniquely eaten at the end, it's not going to be a problem. The gzera was only for that which is in the meal, not which is later on. And that is why it's okay. Just make sure to label them. Okay, I think we can stop here.